So looking back at my notes here, I wrote this presentation, this talk, this essay whilst I was on holiday in Suffolk. I wrote here, as I type away, sitting out, looking out from the window east towards the North Sea, sunlight shimmering off the wide expanse of water, an impenetrable universe exists unseen beneath. Fish, crabs, seals that have come close to land, but what other mysteries may lie beneath those waves? Whilst away, we always look at the stories of Fortean lore, seeking out those mysterious tales and supernatural stories, the dark tourism, as it were, for the Unearthly Bureau. Although I was letting my hair down and enjoying the freedom of the moment, I'm mindful that the week was due to end and it would be back to a routine of work and sleep and doing what we do. And I wanted to uncover some local intriguing stories. Now, I was staying in Kessingland. Apart from my 1967 case of a UFO with light beams that were being cast down over the beach of Kessingland that zipped away and may have indeed been the same craft that was witnessed over Norfolk a little while later, as it features similar characteristics and observations that were made. Beautiful moonrises, churches with grand histories. Where I was staying was proving rather benign, as I said. Quiet for the uncanny mind. So I had to travel a little further to find some Fortean goodness. Rendlesham Forest is relatively close by, but what caught my attention as I looked out of the water and I looked along the map's edge, saw the fishing village, the rich fishing town of Orford. So when it came to producing and writing a presentation to scribe to put together, From the Sea He Came is a title that's meant to invoke the enigmatic allure of the ocean for its hidden inhabitants. We are diving into today into the mysterious world of mermen encounters across the British Isles. We are a region steeped in maritime lore and legend. Rugged coastlines, misty shores, and centuries-old fishing traditions have long been a backdrop to tales of sea creatures who blur the line between myth and reality. And in this briefing, we'll explore the historical accounts, the cultural significance, and the enduring mystery of mermen, those elusive male counterparts to the more famous mermaids. Now, mermaids have long captured our collective imagination, immortalised as enchanting songstresses of the sea. In folklore, they are often depicted as alluring females, figures who, with their haunting melody, would lure sailors to their doom. Their voices echoed over stormy waves, yet not all tales paint mermaids as dangerous. Some sailors, for fleeting moments, share moments of affection, some even going down to the depths to join them. Now, popular culture has shaped our image of these figures from the sea. Mermaids, glamorous, almost otherworldly, often portrayed with flowing hair, shimmering scaled tails, and seashell bras. Gazing into mirrors as a symbol of vanity, their depiction, of course, raises questions. Why the single tail as a symbol of allure? Why is it so different from the human form? And why is there an emphasis on vanity, with mirrors and combs, when their world is an untamed ocean? These images, rooted in religious Victorian art and literature, often overshadow the more complex roles that mermaids have played in folklore. Think Hans Christian Andersen's tale The Little Mermaid from 1837 to Victorian paintings from artists such as John William Waterhouse. Their male counterparts are a different kettle of fish entirely. Pun is definitely intended, but they are not generally as well examined. Mermen are often overshadowed, hoping to cast a fresh perspective here on the myths that have shaped coastal communities for generations. So let's set sail for deep waters of folklore and uncover the secrets of these aquatic beings. So what do you think of mermen? Do you picture a dashing prince or a weathered sea warrior? And why might that be? Mermen might not have seashell bras, but they've certainly got their own way of oceanographic swagger. Let's transport ourselves back to the year 1167, deep in the superstitious and the tumultuous age of the medieval times, during the reign of Henry II. It was a time of significant political upheaval and fervent belief in the supernatural. England was a land of clashing powers. Henry II grappled with Viking descendants, the Danes, also while clashing with Thomas Becket, the defiant Archbishop of Canterbury, over the authority of church versus the crown. Beyond the royal court, tensions also simmered as Welsh princes challenged English dominance. Family feuds tore at the fabric of noble houses. Yet amidst these grand struggles, a peculiar tale emerged from the coastal town of Orford in Suffolk, a story that would captivate the local populace and would echo through the centuries. Picture a cold, windswept morning in the North Sea where local fishermen, hardened by years of battling these elements, cast their nets as they have done countless times before, and as they hauled in their catch, they felt the familiar tug on a full net, heavy with the promise of cod and herring. But as the net broke the surface, amidst the flapping fish, something extraordinary stared back at them. A man, or so it seemed at first glance. The fishermen had shared bewildered looks. How could a man be so far from shore? He was entangled in the net. Was he from the deep, icy waters? Their instinct was to rescue the stranger, to pull him aboard and to offer aid. Yet as they drew closer, their curiosity turned to dread, as this was no ordinary man. According to the medieval chronicler Ralph of Coggeshall, who recorded the event in his Chronicon Anglarium, the creature had a shaggy beard, had wild, matted hair, and skin that appeared to be beast-like, tough, weathered, and unlike any humans. His upper body resembled a man, broad and muscular, yet below the waist his form was unmistakably aquatic. His fish-like features that shimmered in the dim light. Was this a mermaid, a sea spirit, or something more sinister? The fishermen, gripped with fear and superstition, hesitated. In an era where the line between natural and supernatural was razor thin, they saw this creature as an omen, perhaps a warning from the sea itself. And taking no chances, they threw the net back over the strange being and secured it tightly, hastily returning to Orford shore, their minds racing with questions. Now, long before the modern mythos of Aquaman, the people of the 12th century Orford gave their own name to the strange creature they had pulled from the sea, the Wild Man of Orford. This enigmatic, half-human, half-fish was no comic book hero, but a source of awe and fear in this superstitious age. Imagine the scene once again, these narrow, muddy streets of Orford buzzing with excitement and the dread as a wild man was paraded through the town, likely bound in nets and chains on a cart for all to see. Hundreds of villagers, peasants, merchants, children, pushing forward, their eyes wide with that curiosity and terror, desperate to catch a glimpse of this fangled creature. Mounted messengers must have galloped ahead to Orford Castle, the formidable stone fortress built for Henry II, to warn the castle's lord, Bartholomew de Granville, of the monstrous being they were now bringing to his attention. This was no ordinary day in Orford, you can imagine. The arrival of a wild man was an event that has been whispered for generations. Inside the cold, echoing halls of Orford Castle, the wild man was brought to the region's lord. His stern silence unnerved them. His appearance, this shaggy beard, the wild hair, the beast-like skin, and the fish-like lower body wasn't like anything they have seen. They demanded answers. Who was he? Where did he come from? Was he a man, a spirit, or something far worse? But this creature remained mute, choosing silence as his defense in an era where superstition reigned. Fear quickly took hold. Was this wild man a scout for some aquatic enemy? A harbinger of invasion from the sea? Or worse, was this a devilish creature from the underworld sent to test their faith? Patience was not a virtue in these turbulent times, and suspicion grew. In a desperate bid to understand the creature's nature, a voice of reason, or perhaps desperation, suggested a different approach. Taken to St. Bartholomew's Church of Orford, surely if he was human-like, he would recognize the Lord, the scriptures, and the sacred power of the church. The wild man was taken to the dimly lit stone church, surrounded by flickering candles, ornate crosses, and the weight of Christian symbolism. The villagers watched closely, expecting to see the signs of reverence, a bow to the altar, or an acknowledgement of the sacraments. But the wild man only stared, looking around. His eyes scanned through unfamiliar surroundings, crosses, relics, and rituals that held no meaning to him. To the devout onlookers, his lack of recognition was alarming. If he did not know the cross, or the word of the Lord, what was he? A lost soul, a pagan spirit, or something unholy? Now the tale continues in the Chronicle Anglarium by Ralph of Coggeshall, written around 1200, some 33 years after the event, preserving this story for posterity. Bartholomew de Granville, the Lord of Orford Castle, took charge of further investigations, and the interrogation would likely have included harsh methods, including torture, common at the time when they were faced with something unknown, was often met with violence. Was the creature capable of redemption? Could he be taught the value of the Christian faith and accept salvation? Held in captivity within the castle's walls, his origins were a mystery. He refused all food that was being offered to him. Bread, meat, ale, showing no interest in human subsistence. Yet when a raw fish was brought towards him, he consumed it with a ferocious hunger, tearing at it with almost primal intensity. But this act only deepened the villagers' unease. This was a sign of his aquatic nature. Was it something more sinister? The wild men of Orford, caught between man and myth, left the people of 1167 grappling with questions that echo through the ages to today, a testament of this enduring mystery and its secrets. Now, if you were living in 1167 and suddenly Aquaman's uncle has turned up and he's got no trident, he's no superhero, he's not wearing a cape, just a net and a lot of confused villagers. What does the wild men's silence also tell us? Was he protecting a secret or simply unable to bridge the gap between sea and land in the way that he spoke? Perhaps he just simply couldn't articulate words. Maybe they were just gargles, we don't know. After weeks of captivity, interrogations, and failed attempts to unravel the mystery of the wild men of Orford, the story of this enigmatic sea creature reaches a new dramatic conclusion. Picture the scene. It's the rugged coast of Suffolk, where the North Sea is crashing against the shore, and its waves are a reminder of the untamed world beyond. The lords of Orford Castle, led by Bartholomew de Granville, had kept this wild man under close watch, unsure whether he's a marvel, a threat, or something in between. To test his nature, and perhaps that of curiosity, they allowed him to swim in the local sea, but not without precautions. A long, weighted net was strung across the water, and guards stood watch, their eyes fixed on the strange being that seemed more at home in the waves than on land. As the people of Orford knew well, it's a realm that bows to no one. One fateful day, perhaps, and the guards were distracted by a passing ship, maybe a storm, maybe their own weary thoughts. The wild man seized his opportunity, and he took the chance. With strength and agility that defined his captures, he slipped beneath the heavy net, his fish-like lower body propelling him through the water with an uncanny grace. And as he broke free into the open sea, whilst it doesn't say, we can surmise, perhaps with a touch of humour to lighten the story, that he looked back to the shore and gave their men the flipper. A gesture of rebellion, perhaps, from a creature who belonged to the sea and not of the land. And no, of course, he probably didn't have fingers. Web ones, maybe, but the sentiment's clear. In the broader tapestry of mermen encounters across the British Isles, the wild man's tale stands out, not for seduction or song, like the mermaids, but for its raw, untamed spirit. The final act of defiance reminds us that the sea and its creatures will hold secrets that are beyond their grasp. But if you were on that shore, watching the wild man vanish, what would you feel? Relief or wonder? What would you believe that he was? How would you go on to tell more stories? Our journey with the wild man of Orford concludes not only with his escape, but the incredible and indelible mark that he has left on the land and its people. The tale of the half-human, half-fish creature pulled from the North Sea in 1167 embodies this medieval fascination with the mysteries of the deep, a time when the ocean was one of wonder, fear, and the unknown. It will be easy to dismiss the wild man as a mere story, a fleeting fancy of superstition and stormy nights. Yet 8 centuries later, we're still talking about it. This enigmatic figure remains woven into the very fabric of Orford's identity. It's a testament of the power of folklore and a community's soul. If we look around Orford today, you'll see that the wild man's presence is still etched in stone now. On this slide, you can see carvings and statues that adorn the town. In the church font at the St. Bartholomew's, where he was held captive, there is figures made of stone that depict this half man, half fish, his form captured in intricate detail, as if to preserve the memory of this most extraordinary encounter. Now, these carvings may even be contemporary to the event, or crafted soon after, where there's a distinct cultural memory, but they suggest that the wild man is no passing tale, but a story deemed worthy to be in a sacred space. Now, beyond the church, his image appears in unexpected places, the walls of local pubs, in the stonework on other buildings, and even at Orford Castle, where mermen-like figures adorn the architecture. This is not just a modern tourist gimmick designed to lure visitors with tales of the sea. Instead, they reflect something far more intrinsic, a deep, enduring connection to the wild man as a symbol of Orford's maritime heritage. Book covers also keep the legend alive, with modern retellings and historical accounts featuring the wild man's story, from Ralph of Coggleshaw's Chronicon Aguilarium to contemporary novels inspired by the sea. These artifacts show that the wild man is not just a relic of 1167, but a living part of Orford's culture, a reminder that the mysteries of the sea continue to captivate us. As we move across our great country from the wind-swept shores of Orford to the rugged coast of Cumberland, now Cumbria, we encounter another tale of a sea creature. Welcome to Skinburness, a small coastal village near Solway Firth. Here, around the 13th century, a merman stirred the imaginations of fishermen and villagers alike. Compiled at the nearby Lanercost Priory, offers a glimpse into a world where the sea was both a livelihood and an enigma. Picture the scene. It's the misty shores of Skinburness, where the tide meets the land like a restless dance, and local fishermen are casting their nets into the shadow of political turmoil. Robert the Bruce's raids and the struggles of King John's reign, they have spotted an extraordinary figure emerging from the waves. Like the wild man of Orford, this creature has a human face, a human upper body, and shimmering scales and webbed feet like the creatures of the deep. Yet unlike the Orford merman who was captured and confined, this being appears to be fleeting. It was a moment observed diving and resurfacing on multiple occasions, as if taunting the onlookers with its freedom. The villagers could only speculate as to what it was. Was this a merman, a guardian of the sea, or a sign of the divine in this turbulent age? Then the Lanercost Chronicle covers a broad time really between 1201 and 1346. It's compiled at Lanercost Priory, which is a stone's throw from Skinburness. The Chronicle is primarily a record of historical events, wars, royal disputes, and occasional weavings of supernatural anecdotes. In fact, in 1216, there's a story that's wrote as an account within this book. That's the story of King Arthur's spirit that is visiting the Bishop of Winchester. The Skinburness merman, however, is harder to pin down. Then my initial search through Herbert Maxwell's 1913 English translation of this chronicle, based on Joseph Stevenson's 1839 edition, didn't uncover the specific account, and it suggests that it may lay elsewhere, and I haven't gone through it thoroughly enough. Maybe it's local traditions or related manuscripts, yet the tale's persistence in Cumbrian folklore speaks to its significance. And unlike the captured wild man, the Skinburness merman remains elusive, a fleeting shadow, if you will, in the waves, embodying the spirit of the sea. However, I did find a report of a merman sighting in Skinburness, but it comes from a later source, not the Lanercost Chronicle, but according to the Paranormal Database. The year cited is 1782. Henry Reynolds is reportedly spotted a merman off the Cumbrian coast near Skinburness. He initially took it for a pale-skinned teenager and made notes of his strange appearance, the inclusion of a brown, waving tail, shorter, thicker arms, and a long, sharp nose, distinguishing it as a non-human creature. On the misty shores of Skinburness, we journey south the wind-swept coast of County Durham, where the port town of Hartlepool Harbour, another mermaid tale from medieval folklore. Now picture a stormy night. It is the rugged Hartlepool coast where fishermen are ever watchful chroniclers of the sea. Huddled against howling winds and crashing waves, they glimpse a creature rising from the waters, a merman, with an upper body and a fish-like lower half, perhaps scaled and webbed, sheltering near the shore from the churned sea. Now, unlike the wild man of Orford and the Skinburness merman, this gentleman reminds us of the sirens of old, because he is singing. He's singing a haunting, luring song. Now, these sailors are wary of dangerous rocks lining the coast, believing this song is meant to entice them to their doom, this perilous melody that is drawing them towards the jagged embrace of the shore. This merman was never captured. He slipped back into the depths as mysteriously as he had appeared. His presence lingered in tales whispered among Hartlepool's fishermen, passed down orally before being recorded in later accounts. Locals speak also of underwater caves being along the coastline, hidden beneath the cliffs, where this merman might dwell, an unseen realm mirroring the sea's untamed mystery. Now this tale, with its warning to resist curious sounds lest they, lead to the death on the dark beaches, carries weight of maritime folklore, a cautionary tale of the sea's beauty and danger. The siren-like merman, unlike the stoic wild man or the elusive Skinburness figure, it links to broader myths of perilous sea creatures, from the sirens of Greek legend to the mermaids of British lore, where songs led sailors of their peril, but also enchantment. County Durham's connection with merfolk does run deeper. Etched in stone within the ancient walls of Bamburgh Castle, in a Norman chapel built around 1078, the Saxon stonemasons under Norman rule, one of the oldest known depictions of merfolk, adorns a column capital, and this merfolk character, carved in the south face, boasts the human upper body, flowing hair, fish-like tail, and possibly clutching what might be a mirror or a comb, symbols of vanity and seduction in medieval Christian art. The legend of the Skiningrove Mermen is a captivating tale from the sea. It's first recorded in the 16th century in the Cotton manuscripts, and they are a remarkable collection of historical documents that are preserved in the British Library. Now, these manuscripts are a true treasure trove of medieval and early British lore. They provide some of the earliest written evidence of this most extraordinary story. The tale is later referenced by the renowned antiquarian William Camden in his 1610 work Britannia, which is a comprehensive survey of British history, geography, and folklore. Now, Camden's account lends credibility to the story, situating it in the broader tapestry of Britain's maritime myths. The rugged coastline village of Skiningrove, nestled on Yorkshire's northeast coast, and fishermen encountered a phenomenon there that's going to echo through the centuries. It's around 1537, although some suggest it might be earlier as 1524 and as far forward as 1546. But there is an advancing storm front that is churning the North Sea and is disrupting the rhythm of the fishing community. Now, here you may recognise some of the beats of this encounter. As the fishermen hauled in their nets, they discovered an astonishing sea creature entangled within the net. This seaman, this being is described as having the upper body of a man, the unmistakable lower half of a fish, defined their understanding of the natural world. Exhausted from thrashing in their nets, the creature was barely alive when brought aboard. It had eerie shrieks, or screeks as it is mentioned, piercing the stormy air, a sound that left these weathered fishermen in awe. Now, the historical quote captures the gravity in the moment. Old men would be loath to have their credit cracked by the tale of this stale date. The seaman was taken by the fishers. Now, once ashore, the merman was brought before regional leaders who faced then a moral and practical dilemma: what to do with this otherworldly being. Unable to communicate in human language, the creature was housed in an old disused building in Skiningrove, where it was kept for several weeks, or in some accounts months, described as being a fussy eater. The merman refused all food except for raw fish, which he devoured with relish, a behaviour that fascinated and perplexed his captors. Despite his strange appearance and habits, the merman was treated with surprising courtesy, becoming somewhat of a local spectacle. Villagers and curious travellers from afar flocked to see him, turning this quiet village into a hub of intrigue. Most strikingly, the merman displayed a particular fondness for women, as noted in historical accounts. Fair maids were welcomest always to his harbour, whom he would behold with very earnest countenance, and his phlegmatic breast had been touched with the spark of love. This earned him a reputation as being a respectful ladies' man, and it added a touch of humanity to this enigmatic presence. His interactions with villagers also offered a glimpse of the complex interplay of fear, curiosity, and empathy that has defined this extraordinary encounter. The merman's time in Skiningrove came to an abrupt end when his captors, perhaps lulled by routine, grew complacent on their watch. Seizing his chance, the creature fled back into the sea. As he reached the waves, he paused, raising his hand above the water's surface in a gesture that has been interpreted as gratitude for his courteous treatment. Or was he flipping the bird, like the other guy did? But he let out one final haunting shriek before diving into the depths, never to be seen again. Now, his dramatic escape is cemented his legend, and leaving the villagers to ponder the mystery of the strange visitor. It's a fascinating variant of the story that adds that human twist of emotion, and some accounts claim that the fishermen were actually envious of the merman's attention to local women and conspired to free him. They allegedly enlisted the help of a mermaid whose enchanting song lured him back to the sea. In exchange, the fishermen then began a tradition of throwing the first fish of each catch back into the water, a practice said to persist among some Skiningrove fishermen to today. The story of the Skiningrove merman is deeply rooted in the village's Viking-era heritage, reflecting in its name, which derives from the Old Norse meaning Tanner's ravine. This connection underscores the community's long-standing relationship with the sea, where fishing is not just a livelihood, it's a way of life. Steeped in tradition and lore, William Camden, in that 1610 Britannia, offered a rational explanation, suggesting that the merman might have been a seal or a porpoise, common, of course, in the North Sea. He noted that medieval hunters sometimes dressed as women to approach these animals, a practice that is said to be inspired or has been inspired by such tales. Now, this blend of skepticism and myth of the era, it's a struggle to reconcile the known and the unknown. But the legend's enduring appeal is evident. Even in modern times, where in 2012, Glynis Johnson collaborated with local schoolchildren to create a vibrant mosaic of the time on the village's riverside building. This artwork is a beautiful tribute to the fishermen, to the merman, and serves as a tangible link to the village's storied past, inviting residents and visitors to reflect on its heritage. It's intriguing here because it means we've humanized the merman. The story bridges the gap between the familiar and the fantastical. There's a grouping here I also would like to make, and that grouping I'm going to call teachers. And when we talk about teachers from the sea, it's near impossible not to include some very notable examples, such as Owans. You have Nereus, you have Mermen Maclear. Perhaps going back further, you have Enki and Ninhursag. Owans, now that character emerged from the Persian Gulf to impart wisdom to humanity, described by the Babylonian priest Berosos in 3rd century BCE. Owans had the body of a fish, but it had a human head and feet beneath his fish-like form. Now, by day that he would arise from the sea and teach the early Sumerians essential skills, writing, agriculture, laws. At night he returned to the waters. He was said to be quite ugly and gave off a terrible smell, a smell of sulphur. Moreover, that could be hydrogen sulfide. But what was he, and where did he return to nightly? Nereus is sometimes referred to as the Old Man of the Sea. In 8th century Greek mythology, he was said to have shape-shifting qualities. But we may touch upon that again later or in an entirely different video. He was revered for his wisdom, his truthfulness, and cryptic messages. Now, he guided Heracles, or Hercules to some, in Homer's Odyssey, the Hesiod, the Theogony. He taught knowledge of the sea, shipbuilding, delivered information, either directly or through oracles or messengers. Now, he's not to be confused with Poseidon, but you may confuse Poseidon with Mermen and Maclear, who would mount golden horses and would move across the sea. And there's some interesting correlations between their assistants, the metallurgists, little small characters who dwell in caves, who would create armor and forge tools, equipment, and weapons, depicted as having fish heads because they have to wear fish heads to enable them to swim underwater. They are depicted below the statues of Poseidon, around the trim holding him up. Oddly enough, the tool they are most notable for crafting is the trident, the trishula, the tri-spear, a tool of a lot of worldly gods and leaders possess and then passed around. But I'm getting away with myself. We've left the British Isles for too long. Let's return. So let's talk about the Bamburgh Mermen. So Northumberland, England, 1700s. Along the rugged coast is Bamburgh Castle. Yeah, a place I went a few years ago now with my son. Bamburgh Mermen. Now along the coast is near Bamburgh Castle. A merman was sighted by fishermen in the 1700s, as noticed in regional histories and glimpsed in the travel blog from the Lost Kingdom exhibition at the castle. He's described as a man-like figure with long, flowing green hair, a scaly lower body, and webbed hands. Now he is seen swimming alongside boats in calm seas off the Farne Islands. His most striking act was a silent warning, gesturing towards the horizons before diving deep. He alerted fishermen to an approaching storm, saving them from disaster. The locals later attributed this to them teaching them tidal pattern reading, although it may be symbolic embellishment, as he never actually spoke. But this tale is tied to Bamburgh's maritime heritage. It's an imposing castle. It reflects the sea's dual nature as a protector and peril, with the merman acting here as a silent guardian and guide. Now, the marrow of the Blasket Islands from Irish folklore in the 19th century. It's a bit broad referring to them as a group, but in Irish folklore from the Blasket Islands off County Kerry, Merrows, which consist of mermen and mermaids, were known for their interactions with coastal communities. Now, one tale describes a merman with a human face, green hair, and a fish-like body who was spotted by fishermen during a moonlit night. Rather than speaking, he taught through actions, guiding fishermen to safe fishing grounds by swimming ahead of the boat. He then showed them where there was rich shoals of fish. In some versions, he also warned of dangerous currents by creating ripples with his tail. These silent lessons were interpreted as gifts of maritime knowledge, teaching locals to navigate the treacherous Atlantic waters. The Merrows story, part of Ireland's rich oral traditions, underscores the sea's role as a provider and teacher in coastal life. This teaching element is symbolic as the merman's non-verbal guidance taught fishermen practical skills for survival. It reflects that intuitive bond between humans and the sea. But do we look to the sea for lessons like reading weather patterns and respecting nature? Do we look to the sea any longer for things like this? Merman of Port Erin. In Manx folklore, a merman of Port Erin was known for aiding fishermen during the 18th century, as recorded in local tales. Described as a bearded, muscular figure with a fish-like tail. He appeared during low tides, signaling when herring shoals were gathered. He would slap the water with his tail, and fishermen who respected the signals prospered, while those who ignored him faced terrible catches. Now, one tale claims that he taught a young boy to predict fish migrations by observing wave patterns, though this was kept secret. The story persists in Manx oral traditions and is locally referenced in heritage discussions. Scotland, with its many myths and legends, fertile grounds for high strangeness, I say. Near Inverness lies Monray Firth. A 17th century document of Scottish folklore cites the Cassock man. He's not just a man, it might sound a bit familiar from this description. The fisherman spotted a person in the water below. He had a human-like upper body. He had dark seaweed-like hair, and he would slap the water occasionally, pumping behind him with his shimmering fishtail. Now, he was lurking near the Cassock ferry. Now, he was said to guide lost boats to safety by appearing during fog and pointing towards safe channels, effectively teaching navigation skills through his actions. One tale claims that he saved a ferryman by pushing a boat away from the rocks and then vanishing underwater. The story persists also in local lore, having attributed safe passages to his influence. He communicates in silence, but his teaching provided navigation lessons, partaken in maritime knowledge. This is it's a cultural significance. It reflects the Scotland's reliance on coastal waters. It portrays him also as a guardian rather than a threat, which is a rarity in mer folk tales. So let's come down the coast now. Let's come to Wales, the Merman of Anglesey. So we're coming into Mike Bamburgh Jackson's territory here, his stalking grounds. A Welsh tale from Anglesey, found in 19th century folklore collections like Celtic Folklore, Welsh and Ment Volume 1 by John Rees, and this was published in 1901. Now, we owe much of the Anglesey stories and folklore that he recorded. He was a teacher in the area, and he started logging stories and accounts of folklore in the region, bringing together notes of oral tales. Now, the Menai Strait is a narrow, tide-swept channel notorious for its strong currents and sudden storms, making it a fitting setting for a merman tale. Puffin Island, as it's also known as out that way, with its caves and Celtic spiritual traditions, is often seen as a liminal space between the human world and the other world. And one stormy evening, as recounted by a local storyteller to Rees, a fisherman found himself in a terrible condition in worsening weather near Puffin Island, which is often known local as Yeres Sariel. Now, if I've said that right, I'm sorry. Now, one stormy evening, as recounted by a local storyteller to Rees, a fisherman found himself caught in worsening weather near Puffin Island, near Serenol, a small inlet at the western island of the Menai Strait. The sea was churning and the dark clouds signalled an approaching storm. As his boat was being tossed around in the waves, a strange figure emerged from the water. A merman with a human-like face, long, tangled, matted hair like seaweed, and a scaly body that shimmered like fish scales. His eyes were said to be deep and knowing. The merman did not speak, but gestured urgently towards a safer channel, pointing away from the rocky shoals where the currents were fiercest. The fisherman, trusting the creature's guidance, followed the merman's directions, steering his boat through this less turbulent path. The merman then swam alongside, occasionally rising to the surface, giving signal adjustments, guiding the fisherman away from the hidden rocks towards calmer waters. And as the storm subsided, the merman then dove into the depths near Puffin Island, perhaps to those underwater caves, and vanished without a word. And the fishermen then safely returned to shore and attributed their survival to the merman's aid. Now, over time, fishermen have shared this encounter with this community, noting how the merman's gestures taught them to read the strait's tides and anticipate storm patterns. Other fishermen have reported similar sightings, claiming that the merman would appear during rough weather to point out safe routes and warn of approaching gales. Some believe that there is a network of underwater caves beneath this Puffin Island, a place steeped in Celtic lore as a gateway to the other world. Now, the characteristics interesting here. He has long hair, he has a scaly body, but doesn't necessarily have a tail, and he emerges during storms to warn fishermen again of dangerous currents. So he's taught navigation, he's taught tide awareness through gestures, and he's aided in people's survival. How about we return north, far north in fact, to the Shetland Islands, recorded in the Scottish Fairy and Folk Tales of 1901 by George Douglas, is that the Shetland tale features a character called Alavintinus, a merman and son of merwoman Georgia. The story introduces Alavintinus and the merwoman Georgia. In Scotland lore, their characters possess a remarkable ability. That is, they have the ability to transform into selkies, donning seal skins, who's then seemingly transition between the ability to go between water and pearl palaces and the world above. However, tragedy struck when fishermen from Papa Stour seized him. They seized Alavintinus and stripped him of this precious sealskin, which then confined him to land. Their hope emerged through the selfish actions of Georgia, his devoted mother, known for her compassion, but she would carry stranded fishermen across the treacherous sea on her back, as she had forged a bond between human and merworld. In this poignant exchange, Georgia's heroic efforts then paved the way for Alavintinus to reclaim his stolen sealskin. Now, reunited with his true form, he returned with his mother to their enchanted submarine realm. This indirectly, I think, reinforces the whole maritime respect, such as returning skins, though not essentially in the strictest sense of teaching skills. There's certainly a theme of sacrifice, redemption, and a mystical connection between the land and the sea here. Now, Whilst folklore and interpretations would assign the Selkie as a metaphor, the shape-shifting motif, there is a line of thought in there that puts me in the ancient alien camp. If we were to take this as a literal, maybe technological perspective of the Selkie here, these are mountable seahorses. All those ancestors using words and language to describe something that they don't have words for, let alone interpretation through languages. They mount on something, or they get inside something that carries people. Ox, horse, cart, chariot, car. What might they be? Is this something akin to like a jet ski or a submersible, where they leave a foam behind in a trail just like a modern boat would or a jet ski would? She's said to carry fishermen on her back to shore, to retrieve something that her son then puts on, so he then has the ability to dive underwater. Now, whilst this is not a teacher in the Awan sense, there is an indirect impartation of knowledge of the sea's rules, demonstrates the importance of returning stolen skins, which is a recurring Selkie motif. So the idea of a seal-like merman who can move through the water when he wears a seal skin, through a modern lens, could that be something like scuba gear? Don't know. We are veering into ancient aliens territories there, or ancient technology. I do find it interesting, and we do find rather similar accounts around the world. They're staying on the Scottish land. They are few more dangerous than the merfolk, than the ones from the Blue Men of Minch. Now, the Minch is a vast stretch of water. It's located between Scotland and the Outer Hebrides, and they are said to live in underwater caves off the Shiant Islands near the coast of Lewis. The description is similar to humans, but they have blue skin. Greying older faces, grey white beards with longer arms, said to be strong and gruff, weathered from the sea. And their source is found in Donald Alexander Mackenzie's Scottish Folklore and Folklife from 1917, describing the blue men's blue skin, grey faces, long arms, and also in John Gregorian Campbell's Superstitions of the Highlands and the Islands of Scotland from 1900. They appear in the lore to shapeshift, transitioning from being on board vessels to standing on the water's edge to laying on the water on storm creating kelpies. So those familiar with the wider stories of interactions between humans and otherworldly beings, these blue-skinned men would command cryptic duels, battles of wits, and those who won would have the ability to continue their journey, but those who would lose would find themselves in a watery grave for their crew. And shouting out a rhymey couple, the captain must respond in kind without hesitation, and the mortal then earns the respect of the supernatural, and he is then allowed to pass through safely. In fact, there's a record of one such interaction, and I'll read it for you in modern English. The blue man says, "Man of the black cap, what do you say? Be you as proud as the ship that cleaves the brine?" The captain, "My speedy ship takes the shortest way, and I'll follow you line by line." The blue man replies, "My men are eager, my men are ready to drag you below the waves." Captain says in response, "My ship is speedy, my ship is steady. If it sinks, it will wreck your caves." And they went, "All right, cool, no worries." They took it on board. They took his quick wit to be something of respect. When the weather is fair, the blue men of the Minch were alleged to sleep quietly on the surface of the water. Now, one foolhardy group of fishermen almost managed to capture one of the blue men of the Minch. The strait was calm for a change. They decided to sneak past the sentries, and seeing one of the legendary spirits lying on top of the waves, could have been a boat, could have been a jet ski, somebody had the terrible idea to make names for themselves and try and capture them. They gently wrapped the creature in every rope and every chain they had to spare, tying it tightly to ensure that he could not escape. And just when they were almost out of the passage and into the clear, the sea then began to churn around them. Two large, big blue figures rose from the water, raced towards them. "Duncan will be one man," shouted the first figure. "Farquhar will be the two," called the second. The calling of his companions woke the prisoner up, and then snapped his bindings instantaneously like they were made of thread, leaping to his feet, when the blue man then dived overboard, leaving the fisherman terrified at his strength with a story to tell. The Blue Men of the Minch, known in Scottish folklore as Na Fagrum, the Blue Men. The area, named as Hrathnam Tigrum, the Stream of the Blue Men, is a notorious danger waterway with strong currents, whirlpools, unpredictable weather, which likely contributed to the development of these tales. The folklore blog and Undiscovered Scotland both reference two other potential possibilities. Historical accounts of African captives, seen in the Hebrides, dark-skinned individuals shipwrecked or escaped slaves from passing ships. Might they have been mythologized by people into blue-skinned people? Okay, the blue skin could stem from a misunderstanding of skin tone or a poetic exaggeration of the blue hue on their bodies from the water. Another theory connects the blue men to the Picts, an ancient people of Scotland known for painting and tattooing their bodies using a blue woad dye, as described in Roman sources, speculating that the stories of blue-skinned sea beings could serve as memories of Pictish warriors or coastal dwellers, fishermen and raiders. Now, the Picts lived in Scotland around the 9th century. There is no direct folklore to connect them, but Pictic cultures predate the earliest blue men studies. Pictish culture predates Pictish cultures predate the earliest blue men stories that emerged from the Gaelic oral traditions. But there is some interesting distinct parallels here, echoing traits of the trickster-like figures that are found throughout the world. Riddles, shape-shifting descriptions. This particular region has, for centuries, has influence from Christianity, from Norse, Celtic, each cast in perspectives, blending accounts with culture. No primary historical texts, have been found. So we are reading through oral accounts. We are reading through the lens and the filters. But there appears to be something, there's a feeling at the centre of this, like there's something quite tangible. So what's my analysis and context here? So merman characteristics. British mermen are consistently described as being half human, half fish, often with beards, wild hair, scaly skin, emphasizing their hybrid, otherworldly nature, emphasizing that they, unlike mermaids who are often seen as seductive, mermen are often portrayed as wild, silent, protective, with a stronger tie to the sea's depths, such as underwater caves and palaces. There's the teaching roles we also touched on. Explicit teaching akin to ones with agriculture and astronomy is rare. However, mermen like those in Keswick, Anglesey, and Port Erin, they are imparting practical maritime knowledge, navigation, tide prediction, fishing through actions rather than speech. And I believe this reflects Britain's coastal communities valuing survival skills over abstract sciences. There's another pattern to be observed here too, through the accounts alone, is that they can also be grouped into effectively as regional themes. Regional themes there being the English merman, the Orford and the Skiningrove encounter, that were captured, highlighting human-like curiosity and the sea's elusiveness. The Scottish merman from Keswick and Shetland blend the kind of guidance through Selkie-like transformations. They are tied to the North Sea lore, and they, in the case of the Blue Men, have that trickster and shape-shifting characteristics. The Welsh and the Manx ones, Anglesey and Port Erin, are protectors. They are aligned with the Celtic water spirit traditions. In historical context, the medieval accounts such as Orford reflect Christian values of merfolk as marvels or demons, while later tales such as Skiningrove and the 18th century sightings humanize them, possibly influenced by the Enlightenment curiosity, modern retellings, and emphasis on cultural heritage, such as the Skiningrove mosaic. The comparison to mermaids, mermen are less common and prevalent than mermaids in British folklore. There are fewer romantic and tragic narratives. Their stories focus on maritime utility, escape. These reflect male cult. Their focuses are on male. Their stories focus on maritime utility and escape, reflecting male-coded roles as guides and wild beings rather than enchantresses. It's a challenge not to go with the data here. I struggle with dividing them into these categories because each of these accounts occur with no premeditation. Those involved come across the merman, or what follows is actions that we might take given the context of each encounter, placing them as folkloric allegories or moral tales, I think lowers them to simplistic narratives to those who were there. You know, there's something mysterious was here in our midst and has been recorded as such. There has been many lenses applied and interpretations, and I think we're in danger of being reductionist to what may have been likely genuine encounters with the otherworldly. So are merfolk real? Now my lovely friend Claire, who I invited along, has seen this video. She was here when it was recorded live. She's living her best life here in the water as a mermaid, enjoying the sea. I find that to be far too cold. I couldn't do that. Now, so are merfolk real? There's no evidence that supports the existence of merfolk as a real species. Now, from a scientific perspective, aquatic humanoids don't fit any evolutionary niche. Mammals like seals and manatees, which do share traits like intelligence and humanoid silhouettes in water, they have likely inspired sightings by sailors and fishermen. There's a distinct sense, though, of humanity's fascination with the sea as like an unreachable realm, and the wonder of wanting to be in a place where you can't be. I think that's part of human psychology, and we want to project ourselves in there. Now, these tales, like the Blue Men of the Minch, however, may explain natural phenomena, storms, shipwrecks. They embody cultural values, such as warnings about the sea's danger and so on. We should not dismiss these accounts as invalid. They offer, psychological and cultural insights, even if they're not literal. Fishermen's stories of the one that got away or rescues by aquatic beings may stem from interpretations, misinterpretations, oral traditions, but we as humans have a tendency to anthropomorphize these records of these encounters. I don't believe we should dismiss them as flights of fancy. I think we're missing a very cultural, crucial perspective here. That is, well, there's nothing to see here. We didn't see it. It's the one that got away. But actually, sometimes the one did get away. That's true. There's a true story, a nugget at the heart of the story. And I think we should carry on looking with wonder in their heart. But then there's an excitable part of my mind. Call it ancient astronaut theory, or those with technology that appears to be out of time. There's a constant struggle, with my skeptical, rational mind that gets so excited. But we have an agreement. I have to be a rational journalist first, and it's boring, I know. But maybe we had explorers there, or survivors who become mixed up with observations, rescue tales, and accidental meetings as aquatic humanoids. In that perspective, we are seeing that through the lens, and sympathetic to support and are wanting to avoid tragedies. Accidentally getting caught in the net when a buffet of captured fish was available. The records and accounts do exist. These people have found themselves into the historical accounts. They've interacted with people who are real. But I've often wondered, are the Selkie more like jet skis or boats? That's why there's this churn behind the water that can cause the boats to toss and turn in their wake and leave white foam behind. There's ones that they lie in water. It's calm. Have they parked up and gone diving? So that's when they rose up from the water. And the fact that there was that chap there who couldn't return to the water because he didn't have his special seal suit. Similarly, there's those blue beings from the Minch. Today we wear figure-hugging wetsuits. Was this the colour of the wetsuit? Were they like a crew? These bearded aquatic teachers, bringing knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, governance, law. Although, what is perhaps not in this presentation, and it's not really for this line of speculative thought, but these are curious hogs that tick around when I see the story and I go, I think they're talking about something else than an allegory. There's a bit more meat on the bone that's hidden within there. But I want to end this presentation here. This has been From the Sea He Came, an exploration of Merman from the British Isles, along with a little bit of my own interpretation. I'm so sorry. But I would like to say thank you very much for coming along with me on this journey. My name is Defined Kristian. You can find me on X, on Facebook, and on YouTube. KristianLander.com is the place to find me, and you can send me an email while you're there as well. So thank you once again, and perhaps more to come.